This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome back, everybody, to the X-Cast. As ever, the truth is in here. I'm your host today, Carl Sweeney, and thank you very much for joining me for this discussion, which is all about Season 8, Episode 4, Roadrunners. And I can think of no finer tabernacles, as I say in the episode, than to join me, than Tony Black, first of all. Hey, Tony.
I feel so loved. Hi, guys.
You are loved. You are loved.
Yeah.
You're loved. You're amongst friends today because Sarah Blair is also with us. Hi, Sarah.
Hey.
How's it going, Sarah?
I'm good. Hanging in there.
It's good to be back as a trio again, isn't it? What was the last one we did? It was first person shooter.
First person shooter. Yeah. That was fun.
Good time.
This is a better episode. This is a much better episode, I think. Good fun.
Yeah.
I think it's substantially better, yeah. It's good to be back with you. We always have a good time.
Yeah.
Actually, Sarah, maybe you can help us out. One of my friends told me this the other day. Basically, men don't get enough compliments, right? And the idea behind this is that women compliment each other all the time, right?
Uh-huh.
Men, like me and Tony, will never compliment each other because male friendships just don't work in that way. So there's a problem where men don't hear enough positive vibes, basically. So, why don't you start by complimenting myself and Tony? A nice way to kick off this podcast. What's good about Tony? Say something nice about Tony. Come on.
Paragons of podcasting. You guys. Yeah. It's Tony, what can I say? I'm so grateful that you...
Yeah. No, carry on. Yeah. This will do my ego good. Yeah.
It's been really great that you have started such an amazing podcasting journey for all of us. We wouldn't be here without you. And Carl, you are just like my podcasting pal. So I mean, y'all, it's been fun to grow and learn podcasting with you guys.
Yeah, cheers, Sarah. I think despite all your flaws, you're also a very nice person. So,
Thank you.
No, do you know what I mean, Tony? It's true, isn't it?
That was the greatest backhanded compliment I've ever heard in my life. Despite all your flaws.
Yeah. No, I don't mean that.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's true.
Blokes don't praise each other enough, I don't think.
No,
so.
You're right.
I don't know why if blokes don't praise each other enough, why am I the one giving you compliments? Tony, I think you need to give Carl a compliment. Carl, you need to give Tony a compliment.
Tony, you do need to give me a compliment. I think I agree with Sarah.
I'm happy to do this. I genuinely think I have learned a lot from you as a podcaster and a general mind about the kind of things we talk about. I think you're a genuinely great host of podcasting. You're one of the best people I've ever listened to. So there you go, mate. That's mine.
Well, for you, Tony, I'd say I'm always, really impressed and pleased that your enthusiasm is contagious. I think that's what I would say. And cheers. I think that it comes from a very genuine, distinctive place. It seems like to me. So keep it up. Don't ever lose that. You're getting on a bit now, but just don't ever lose it.
Again,
right.
The master of backhanded compliments. Cheers, mate.
I'm just thankful that you guys have slightly more personality than a banana slug. So.
Right, I think that has to be the segue, isn't it? Because we're getting
just a bit more.
Yeah. Right, Roadrunners. Season 8, Episode 4, like I said. Written by Vince Gilligan. Directed by Rod Hardy, who also then directs one or two others, I think, in Season 8. First aired in November 2000 in the US, but Tony and I would have had to wait, I believe, until March 2001 to see it in the UK.
Yep.
So still a substantial gap at that time, unfortunately. I think before we get to this episode, Tony, this is the first time we're speaking with you for season 8, isn't it? So do you want to just give us like the overview, what you think about season 8? I know you're positive on it, so I'm kind of just teeing you up for that. Like you're a fan of this season, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've mentioned it before, haven't I? And I've talked about how excited I am for season 8. I'm really excited to listen. So as we record this, we're not obviously recording in order and things like that, and near releases as you'll be listening to this. So I'm yet to listen to some of the previous episodes and the ones to come, and it's going to be great as a fan because I've genuinely loved season 8 since the beginning. You know, and it's funny watching it back. I did the whole rewatch of it recently, and last year, and it just works so well. And I do remember at the time feeling sad that Mulder wasn't going to be around as much, you know. But I mean, the season is still about him in many ways, obviously. And I just think Robert Patrick is brilliant. Like he injects such verve and vitality into a show that I definitely don't subscribe to the idea had faded away or wasn't as good or anything like that. That 7th season, I genuinely love that. I do. And I could have watched those two just happily heading towards middle age, Mulder and Scully, you know, doing some comedy cases, that would have been great. But this season has a real punch to it in so many ways. And an episode like Roadrunners is a great example of how they're really getting back to basics. This for me, this is probably my second or third favourite season, and I think it's because this is the one that reminds me of season 2 the most, in that it gets back to that really uncanny, dark, weird America vibe, especially in this first 12 episodes or so, which is actually my favourite run. As awful as it is to say, the whole Scully and Doggett partnership, which you don't see again in this way ever, is my favourite chunk of the season because it's just got some great standalone stories that are really scary X-Files stuff, and we haven't had that in a long time. So yeah, I love it to bits. I think it's a great season.
Like you say, we're kind of recording things a bit out of order, which means that actually, Sarah, you've done a substantial amount of recording and rewatching of season 8 in the last few weeks, haven't you?
Somewhat,
you've done some of the other episodes.
Mostly at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah. On Within, we talked a bit about like overall feelings going into the season, but how are you finding it now as you're doing a bit of recording and watching and whatever?
I can understand why people are fans of this season, just on an objective level. I am still learning to like it. Not quite there yet, but I can definitely understand, you know, what people are saying about it, and it's been very enlightening and interesting to hear what people have to say about it. So I'm definitely looking forward to everybody getting to listen to these episodes and explore just what people love about this season.
You know though, Sarah, I think it genuinely is okay. Much as we joke about it, and we've joked before, haven't we, and said you will love season 8, Sarah, right? It's okay if it never quite means as much to you as the Mulder and Scully pure stuff, because, you know, in many ways, that's not the only reason you love this show, obviously, but you are quite the shipper. And I think anyone who is more invested in that relationship in that way, they're never really, I think, going to click, particularly with this first 12 episodes of the X-Files on that level. Even though they might be able to see some of these stories as being really good standalones and really well written and stuff and produced, I totally get it if that's not something that clicks in that way. So don't worry about that.
Thanks.
You know, you're okay. You are forgiven. if you get to the end, you're like, nah, I'll go back to season 6. Thanks. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all right.
And I think though that, because like I've just done the round table where we ranked for seasons with a few other people, and I think on that 2 of us really liked season 8 and had it quite high, and 2 of us didn't, and they had it quite low. And I can understand why there is that kind of gulf with this season, because it is such a departure from what has come before. And like for me, I had no trouble, kind of like you've described, Tony, of getting on board with that. Like you said, I think Robert Patrick does inject something into the series that is really welcome. But at the same time, I can also understand why that jump is a bit difficult for people to bridge as well. You know what I mean?
And you know what? It was more difficult for me back then. I remember that. You know, I'm not going to pretend I was like, oh, season 8's rescued the whole show, that kind of thing. No, I remember at the time thinking, oh, is this going to work without much? This is weird. Where's David Duchovny? I did, you know, totally. So anyone watching it now, particularly maybe going back to it, is definitely, I think, going to feel that in some ways. Even knowing that they come back together in seasons 10, 11, and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's still going to be a bit Marmite, which is fine, absolutely fine.
Now, speaking of Marmite, I think this episode might be a bit of a Marmite thing, just between us here. Tony, let's start with you. General thoughts on Roadrunners and a mark out of 10. How high? How high are you going? It's going to be high.
How am I going? This is a solid 9 out of 10. No question. This might be my favourite episode of season 8. Possibly. It's rivaling that. It's either this or the other 2 episodes I'm going to be on, which is, I think, without, spoiling the surprise, Red Rum, and which is probably the most non-Mulder and Scully episode of The X-Files ever, in many ways, because it barely features even Scully. And Viennan later in the season, which does have Mulder in it, obviously. But this is, I think this is a terrific episode. Like, it is pure, weird, creepy, literally under your skin X-Files storytelling. I love how Scully is at the forefront of it, and it really just throws a completely isolated Scully into a situation that, I mean, I'm not saying Mulder would breeze through it, but if they were partnered together, Mulder would probably wouldn't. What happens to Scully in this might not have happened had he been there, And I think it really throws her into a situation where she is completely isolated in a remote place, and it just does a great job of setting up what this season's going to be in that way. And it's just brilliantly shot, brilliantly lit, evocatively told. Just really, I will know the scene, and we'll talk about it, but the scene where they're walking towards Scully with the Jesus slug, and she's going, "I'm pregnant!" It's just, I'm like, every time I watch it, I'm like, oh, it's horrible, get away! So, yeah, I am a huge Roadrunners fan. Love it.
Okay, so...
Beat that! Beat that, Sweeney.
Yeah. Well, in the interest of balance, I think we're going to offer up a contrasting perspective. Yeah. Sarah, are you a 9 out of 10 or not?
I feel quite differently about this episode.
Shocked face.
I know. It's so interesting to me to hear people talk about how frightening and terrifying this episode is, because it just does not affect me that way. I just don't get why it's scary. I mean, okay, I do get why it's scary. I just don't feel it personally in the depths of my soul. To me, Patience is way more terrifying, and Rua is way more terrifying, irresistible. That is scary stuff. This, I don't know what it is. I've been trying so hard to pinpoint why it doesn't affect me the same way. It's probably the slug. It just is so comical to me. I just laugh all the way through this episode. It's so ridiculous. And I don't know. I try so hard to be scared by this episode. I'm just not. And I do recall one time we took a trip to Yosemite, a road trip, and we passed through a town that was very similar to this. And it was unnerving to be in an isolated place like that. I can understand that probably Vince Gilligan has been in a place like that, because it does feel very isolating and nerve-wracking to travel through there, because there's literally nothing around. And it's like this worn down one street little place that you're like, if we got a flat tire, if anything happened here, we would be trapped, and it would be, scary. But, we got an ice cream sandwich and went on our way. And everybody was so nice. And it was, it just, I don't know. It feels like when Scully is traveling through this place, the pacing of it is very slow and drawn out, and I just don't feel the tension of it. So it's probably just a me problem. I know people are really into the tension of it, and I just don't feel it. So yeah.
Can I press you for a mark out of 10, Sarah? I'm not sure I heard that there.
3.
Oh my goodness!
I know.
Oh,
I
my
just
goodness.
don't like this.
Is this where you give us a 6, Carl, for yours and really get the ballot? Get the middle bit.
No, actually, no. I'm going to go even higher than you, Tony. I'm going to go 9.5.
Whoa!
9.
Okay.
Because I think this is a classic in my book.
Yeah.
Like we've already touched on, I think quite a bit of this early part of season 8 feels like something of a throwback, doesn't it? Back to creepy, scary stuff. I think this one goes kind of over, this one is, it is that, but what puts it over the edge and makes it a great episode is that it can only really take place at this point in time. It can only really take place very early season 8, can't it? Like, put it a bit earlier, it wouldn't have the same resonance. Put it later and it wouldn't. So if it was in an earlier season, and maybe kind of like you're saying, Tony, I don't think you could really get the premise off the ground in the same way. Not easily, anyway, because Scully wouldn't have gone off on her own if Mulder was around. There's no way she's going to stumble across something like this like she did with something like Chinga. Do you know what I mean? She's not going to be going off holidaying in this desert. And if they were together, the feeling of isolation wouldn't be as pronounced. I don't think. So hard to do it earlier. Hard to do it much later than it sits here, isn't it? Because it needs to come very early in that partnership with Doggett, considering what happens here. And it also needs to come very early in her pregnancy, I think. So I think the basic case, I do find it creepy. Like Tony, I find it really eerie and unsettling. I think the basic case would always be that. It would always be an icky idea. So you could do an episode about a cult worshipping a slug in another season, potentially. But I think what puts it up, I think this would be top 10, top 20 X-Files episodes ever for me. It's in that sort of realm. Because I think that cult storyline is really resonant because there are some warped kind of parallels going on. There's an affinity between this idea of the slug being implanted into people and the idea of pregnancy, which of course comes into play. There's this weird religious aspect to it, which is then going to be mirrored or returned to in some way when Scully's baby is born and becomes this object of religious fascination later in the series, isn't there? So I think it's almost like this weird funhouse mirror thing going on with this episode about some of the other stuff that's going on. So yeah, I think it's really good. I think I like the pacing of it. To return to Sarah's point, I like that you get about half an hour or so of off-kilter mounting tension. Then you get 10 minutes of just all-out horror, don't you? Really intense stuff. Then you got a brief epilogue, which we'll talk about, with Scully recovering in the hospital. So I think perfectly judged in that regard. So I think the problem is we're all going to be in exactly the same position at the end of this podcast, aren't we? Nobody's going to change their mind. I think we're too polarized on this one, I think.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, there's not going to be any kind of Sarah. Well, maybe we can get Sarah up to a 5. Maybe if we can get Sarah up to a 5, then
job done.
I'm
We'll
all right.
see.
I'm all right with that.
We'll
yeah,
see.
Okay, we'll see. Let's see how we go.
I
know everybody is screaming at me right now. They're just like, "Why, Sarah? 3? That's why." No, they're just all yelling at me, and that's fine.
No, I think I get it. And we'll talk. Obviously, go into more detail about it, but I get it, Sarah. I do. I can see where you're coming from for sure. Yeah, I really can.
And so much of it is we can try and talk about looking at these things objectively and all of that. I don't think it is possible to actually be objective about anything or something like this, because everybody's bringing their own taste, experience to bear on watching an episode of TV. Everybody's going to look at it slightly different. And I think The X-Files is the classic example of that, because nobody agrees about anything in relation to this series, do they? So many people have different favourite seasons, different favourite episodes, different aspects that they really key into. It's an insurmountable thing, isn't it? There's never going to be uniformity. And I think in some ways that's really good.
That's what makes it fun, I think.
Yeah.
To hear everybody's differing points of view and what they bring to it. And because you can't not bring your own life experiences into it. And that goes for any kind of art, and
I agree.
So it's hard to be completely objective about it. Objectively, I can see why this is an effective episode. It just doesn't affect me personally. So
maybe if you'd gone through that little town near Yosemite and not had an ice cream sandwich, this would all be different, Sarah. Maybe that's what it is.
If there had been a banana slug instead of an ice cream sandwich, perhaps.
Maybe.
But still, I don't, maybe it is the banana slug. Like, it's like the most non-threatening
Thing is,
creature.
though,
there's no teeth. There's no vicious, like, fur. There's no claw. It's completely non-threatening.
When Carl said earlier, an episode about a cult worshipping a slug, I did laugh in my head. I was a bit like, I get it. Like, I kind of get when you put it out there in that way. It sounds absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. So, trying to describe this episode to someone who didn't know the X-Files would be fun, I think. They'd be like, what the fuck?
I like that it's so odd, though. That's one of the things I think is a real strength, to be honest. Yeah. Before we get into like the breakdown, I would think we should say that this is the only Vince Gilligan episode in season 8. I think that's a real shame. I mean, as much as I like season 8, I think if you had another couple of episodes written by him, I think it would really benefit from them, because he's very good at lots of things, but some of the things that the series needs to do in this year, I think would have benefited from his touch. Do you agree, Tony?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think he would have been very good at, I think, writing particular episodes. Maybe he would have injected a little bit more of that comic sensibility at points as well, in a way that we don't really get in season 8 in the same way. You know, when he's done episodes like Bad Blood or Ex-Cops, you might have found he might have done something interesting like that. But no, he's obviously a brilliant mind, and he's got so many reference points. I mean, you're probably going to talk about this, Carl, but the fact that he bases this whole story on Bad Day at Black Rock, the John Sturges film, is the kind of, you know, cinematic referencing that I don't know if every single X-Files writer would do or had in their mind. So I think, you know, he's got a real storehouse in his head. So it would have been, it's a shame we didn't get more, really.
Yeah, and I think what I was thinking as well is, like, he was very shrewd at adapting to things when the series sort of changed around him, in the sense that, like, so when they moved to Los Angeles, and he does episode 2 in the LA area, doesn't he, in Drive? He writes that.
Yeah.
And you can see how very cleverly he taps into, okay, we've got new locations that we're using now. How can we utilize them and really make them integral to this episode?
He loves the desert. He loves the desert, doesn't he? I mean, you know, and then in Breaking Bad, he's doing all that, isn't he? You know, with the desert landscape and stuff. Well,
similar to this episode, similar to John Doe, I suppose, in some ways, you know. So yeah, I think it's a real shame he wasn't on hand a bit more this season. He was doing The Lone Gunman, wasn't he? He was heavily involved with that. So
that went so well.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Sarah?
I love Vince Gilligan. He's my favorite X-Files writer, and I don't know. I have feelings that he is the writer of this episode, because, again, it's interesting because I feel like I wonder if he meant for it to be somewhat comical and somehow it just got lost in translation somehow, or if he really did mean for it to be completely straight-laced and seriously terrifying. I just wonder if he meant because, for example, you know, when I was writing one of my books, I specifically thought about the most fuzzy, adorable creature that I could, which is a koala. And I made it scary and, like, found a way to make it terrifying. And now, you know, I have readers all the time being like, I never knew koalas could be scary, but you did it. And I wonder if that's what he was doing with the banana slug, like trying to make the banana slug scary. Like, I never knew a banana slug of all creatures could be terrifying, yet here we are. This is a scary creature.
I don't know, because I feel like most people are grossed out inherently by slugs. I think if you're comfortable with them, that's great. But I think most people probably find them a bit weird and disgusting. Don't you think?
It is gross and weird. It's just not scary. So,
I'm going to park thoughts on this for later, because when we talk more about the slug, I'm going to put a pin in that for me. I want to talk more about that later.
Okay, so I think the only thing we'll do before we go into the episode breakdown then is a quick look at IMDb. Do you want to have a hazard a guess, Sarah? What do you think this episode would have over there?
I'm sure it's in the 8s somewhere. I know a lot of people like this episode. 8.2.
Okay. Tony?
I'm going to say about 8.4, I think, for this one.
Ooh. Sarah clearly looked at it before the episode. I'm going to accuse it is 8.2. I accuse you, Sarah. Curiously, that only puts it 9th for the season. I was quite surprised when I worked that out. There are 8 episodes with a higher rating for the season 8. So it would definitely, I think, be my top favourite, or even maybe second favourite. So a bit low for me.
Yeah, same.
I don't know where it'd come on your list, Sarah, because your opinions of season 8 are a bit...
To be fair, I have been recording a lot of season 8, so I've already seen most of these.
Okay.
Has anyone had a conversation yet about what the worst season 8 episode is? Because we talk about this with like all the others, don't we? There's always one that tends to stand out in most of these seasons where everyone goes, "Oh, first person shooter." Ugh. What's the season 8 one? That's what I keep
Bad
wondering.
Law. It's Bad Law.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
See, I love Bad Law, but
It's
like,
Yeah.
It's not Bad Law. I think it's going to be...
Salvage, Sure Kill and Bad Law.
I think Sure Kill and Salvage are the two. That the thing is, they're not like horrific episodes like some of those earlier seasons.
Yeah.
Installments you're talking about. They're just very bland and a bit forgettable, you know.
And it's interesting they all come together in that chunk.
Yeah.
It's when they struggle when they're doing like more traditional investigations. Like these early ones are great because Doggett and Scully are still working things out a bit. When that sort of recedes a bit, and it's just about a bit more about the case, that's where they run into a bit of trouble, I think. But in an earlier season, something like that would have probably been carried by the Coveney and Anderson a bit more. Yeah. And never been, I think that's the issue, essentially.
Yeah, I'm going to say Salvage, because Sure Kill has, the teaser of Sure Kill is terrific. It's just a shame the rest of the episode isn't for me, but Salvage makes sense. I'm not having a word said against Badler. I think I love that episode. I mean, it's mental, but I love that episode. Anyway, that's a different chat. I'm looking forward to that podcast, Sarah. That'll be good. Can't wait to hear that.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, then. I think without further ado, we should have a closer look at Roadrunners. Okay, so we kick off in the Utah desert. The guy waiting for the bus, which turns up eventually. I like this teaser. I like the surprise, because actually coming back to this episode earlier today to watch it for the first time in a few years, I'd kind of assumed he was the guy who would be then bumped off in the teaser. I'd kind of forgotten how it played out, But of course it's not. It's the guy on crutches who's bludgeoned to death. I think there's a real air of mystery to it all. Like, it's the bare minimum of dialogue, which is actually a bit of a theme through some of the scenes too. Like I say, a bit of a surprise, and no intimation yet of really where it's going. We can maybe sense it's a cult. We don't know that it's got this dimension with the slug or anything like that. So I'm a fan of this teaser, Tony.
Yeah, for similar reasons, because you have no idea. It is really open. There's obviously a bunch of weird people. They kill a crippled man. It's like, well, what the hell? Where's it? Yeah, where is this going completely? And it's very, very strange and dark. I mean, that's the thing. It's dark. The whole thing has that aesthetic about it that you wouldn't have seen in the same way in most of season 7, the last season. It's just, and Patience had the same thing, didn't it? It really foregrounds that gloom. So great teaser.
I will say this is the part of the episode that I like the best. I think it is
It's your Sure Kill.
It is scary.
Yeah.
I mean, I do get frightened because, there is that element of solitude. It's in the middle of the night. You got this one guy at this random bus stop in the middle of the desert, and you don't
what's
even...
he doing there?
Yeah, like, what the heck? And you get the idea that he's been waiting a really long time for this bus, and, clearly I would not want to walk anywhere in the desert, like in any direction like that. He's got to wait at that spot no matter what, if there's going to be a bus to pick him up. And, then he's with all these people and you just get out there and then it turns into like Shirley Jackson. And you're just like, what is happening? And you just can't turn away. Yeah. It's horrific and it is very scary. So I think this is definitely the scariest part of the episode.
Yeah. So that Sarah's the backhanded compliment.
Yeah. There's something just about the bus, isn't there, as well in this context? I think that's strange. It's like it has that, for me. The bus in a way has that dual from Spielberg's dual effect in that it's something that is just really tethered to that environment. This idea of this bus just cruising around all these deserted locations, picking up, vulnerable people. And then,
the fact that it's full as well, like when he gets on and there's all these other people on it.
Yeah, it's just and they don't say a word as they get off. There's so many like really strange beats about this that's just really well thought out. Yeah, and it's really really eerie.
I agree. It's how vacant they are, isn't it? And how vacant like the driver is as well adds to it, I think. Mm. Yeah, so I agree. Great start to the episode. We pick up then with Scully in the desert already, don't we? Alone. So already on the case, which is interesting. And yeah, I think there's a wide shot here, which I think is quite pivotal. It's when you sort of see Scully's quite small in the frame in the center of it, and you just see the vast expanse of land around her. So she's quite isolated in this particular context, and it's quite kind of timely as well in terms of where she is at this point in the series, isn't it? Is what I'm thinking, in the sense that Mulder is gone, of course. So I think this is quite clever, actually.
Yeah, because it's really establishing that I think that she's throwing herself into work. She sort of says that in the last. I think she said that in Patience. That she needs to be at work, or sort of at the end of without. And it's I don't know if this episode has any mention of Mulder in any way. I don't remember his name coming up here, which is key because so many of these episodes do, at various points as a mention of him where he props up, particularly as we get towards the middle of the season. But if you watch this episode without knowing any of this other stuff that was going on in the background, and that's the thing with season 8, of all the other seasons, there is so much going on in the background when all these cases, these standalones are happening. The pregnancy, Mulder's disappearance, Doggett as integrating into the X-Files. It's a rare season in that it has, in theory, you could have had serialized elements through every single episode of this. And obviously you get the pregnancy mentioned, so that, I guess, is a serialized element. But do you know what I mean? It's like, it really, it's isolated in that sense, in that it's completely Scully trying to just do the job. And in that way, like we said earlier, we've never quite seen her in this way before, where we've seen Mulder loads of times go off on his own and end up in the middle of nowhere looking at something, and then he calls Scully up, or Scully's like, I don't know, washing Queequeg or whatever. He's I'm just chasing some UFOs or whatever in the day. But we've never seen Scully do this, and have to call Doggett up, and that's interesting.
What do you think, Sarah, of like Scully's decision to take on this case alone? Which obviously I think you can say with hindsight is a big mistake, but what do you make of her decision to do that to begin with?
I do like that she is doing her best to just do the job and try to. I think this is a good example of her journey where she is trying to kind of assume Mulder's role on the X-Files and sort of try to act like he would act, which, kind of culminates at Bad Law, where she has that breakdown. And I think it's a good element to introduce here. And I don't think it's entirely fair of me to have this opinion, but I think that it would be a much more effective episode if it were Mulder. I think, obviously it can't be, because that's not the point of season 8. I get it. It's not fair at all. But, thinking of Mulder out there in the desert and like investigating on his own, and then having that tension of Scully being worried for him and not being able to get to him and have him missing, I feel like maybe that's what I'm missing from it. And I do appreciate Doggett's character in this episode. I really like how he handles things, but I don't feel like he cares enough about Scully yet to have that same kind of tension and fear, in that interaction. So maybe that's what's not working for me. I'm not really sure.
I think it would be a very different episode with Mulder in this situation, I think, because I feel like it takes on a heightened power because she is pregnant. I think that adds quite a lot to it, even though through most of the episode it's implicit, but the viewer knows it. And then it obviously does get referred to later on. So if Mulder in the same scenario, I think would work fine, but I think perhaps not as well for me. I don't know, Tony.
Yeah.
I it would be a different episode. I don't quite know what the shape of that would be. I think the reason maybe it works so well with Scully is because it is such an unerringly weird thing that has very little explanation to it, this whole thing, really. We don't ever know where that slug came from, why they were worshipping it as Jesus, all this stuff, right? We don't have any of those answers. It just is. It's just there. And for that to be in Scully, I mean, the pregnancy, like you say, Carl, adds that heightened dimension. But even without the pregnancy, having Scully actually infected with that thing, given Scully is the skeptics, given Scully we've followed for years as the one who doesn't believe in most of this stuff, it takes on for me an extra resonance. The horror seems more powerful because it's Scully than if it were Mulder, I think. And I don't know, but it depends on how it's written. You know, it does. It could work potentially, Sarah, with Mulder, but I think it would just be a different episode, and I don't know what that shape would be.
It'd be a different beast, yeah.
Yeah.
And I quite like what the thing you were talking about with Doggett, Sarah. I quite like that he's a bit more matter of fact about it, you know, and he just ends up putting two and two together, and that leads him out there, and eventually he finds I think the way he handles that is quite effective, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I like that he is getting to show his detective, skills and his cop skills. He's very rational and pragmatic in a way that I kind of feel like maybe Scully, like she's just, it's a different kind of flavor from her. Mm-hmm. Like she approaches things from a scientific point of view and a rational point of view, but he approaches it from an investigative point of view, I think. And, evidence and facts in a way is similar to her trying to get evidence and science facts, but just different enough that it's a different flavor that I don't mind. I enjoy it. Yeah.
This was also as well, Gilligan said that he wanted Doggett in this episode to really be established as like the hero figure in this way, and actually that he's, audiences might have considered him to be, who is this guy? Is he really on her side? Is he? And in this episode, he comes to her rescue, basically, which, yes, is a tried and tested X-Files trope, Scully in peril being rescued. But I think in this case, it's okay in that sense, because it's trying to establish that Doggett is her partner, is on her side, and it's beginning that relationship that then will develop that real respectful, partnership that isn't sexual, isn't romantic, but is based on that. When eventually she says that he's above reproach, that's the line I think she says to Mulder. And it's these kind of moments, I think, that get us to that point much later where there is that affection.
I think it works quite well, Tony, as well, that, like you say, potentially you could say it's a bit tired or familiar having Scully be rescued in this way. However, she's fucked up here, hasn't she? Like, she got herself into this mess. Do you know what I mean? Like, she shouldn't have gone out there on her own, really. No. But it's understandable in this context why she might think that was a good idea, or why she might have just gone ahead and done it.
Yeah, he basically tells her that at the end, doesn't he? If this was a HBO cable drama, he would have gone, "Yeah, you fucked up, Scully." But he does. He says it at the end. Yeah, you shouldn't have done it. Yeah. But it takes, obviously, Scully, even more than a lot of other people, it takes time to trust. Yeah. In that world, in that way, especially with Mulder gone. So it would have been weird, I think, had she gone out with him and they made a point of that. I think that's the whole idea. And then she does call him for. I quite like the reference to the fact he's read all the cases. Again, and it's just to remind us that you might have some knowledge about this because we've seen this kind of thing before. So that's a good way of sort of bringing him in without him being there and it affecting the story in that way.
Yeah, I like that idea that he does his homework, which they return to in several episodes, I think, in season 8.
Yeah.
And I think it fits well with what we know of him as a former policeman and all this stuff, In terms of Scully having to do a few different things this season, obviously because of Mulder's absence, I like that moment where she calls him up, where she calls Doggett up.
Yeah.
And she lays out the case. She needs his help to find a case file. And she can't quite remember exactly what she's read. It's the kind of thing we've seen Mulder get in touch with her about in the past, isn't it? Like, I've got case files on this and that. And maybe it's the kind of thing he'd have been able to reel off. Like, he might have remembered the details maybe a bit more. Or maybe not. It depends what the plot needed, But I think it's interesting to see her do that, because it's traditionally is not what she would be in that position. She wouldn't be in that position, would she?
And I imagine he would have, because he had encyclopedic knowledge of it all, didn't he? But it's classically one of those cases as well that they've had instances of it before, but they've never solved it. You get that quite often, don't you? And Mulder's like, I've seen this before. And it's a bit like, I always wonder, has he got a system? Has he got like a system of, that's sort of ticking away in the background, the Jesus slug, we'll leave that. And then eventually it comes to the fore. I don't know. But
Folie à Dieu is the one that comes to mind for me, where it's like he remembers that there's been a similar phrase, isn't there? Hiding in the light. He remembers that, doesn't he? He doesn't.
Yeah.
That's that kind of scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, Sarah is doing a bit of childcare, but I reckon we just keep talking. She'll be back with us soon, I'm sure. I wanted to mention one line to you, Tony, which was when she goes to see that guy. Well, she goes to the gas station and meets that guy. The gas station with no gas, and the guy puts water in a tank. Quite a key scene, because she reveals that she's a doctor, which I think then leads him to tell the others that then they need her, all of that. But he says at one point, we're not really a town, just a few like-minded people trying to keep the modern world at bay. So I don't know about you, but I'm thinking there of the one that leapt to mind for me there was the episode Home, but potentially quite a few other episodes with that kind of dynamic going on, isn't it?
The idea that that the modern world doesn't offer them anything, and they retreat into. I suppose in Home it was more readable, wasn't it? It was maybe a bit more clear and readable as an idea, and we talked recently, didn't we? We did Glenn Morgan, and we did the live episode about Home, we went into more details about that. But the idea with this maybe is that these people, they're religious fanatics, aren't they? They are sort of classics, middle American religious fanatics. But I think in a way, that maybe doesn't resonate as much as in something like Home, because we don't understand enough about them. Like with the peacocks, even though they are monsters, quote unquote, we get the psychology to an extent behind them, because you get expositional dialogue with Mrs. Peacock, and she explains the rationale for why they are isolated, why they're living like Civil War, era lives. But here we know so little about these people and their motivations, and so little about the weirdness at the heart of the episode, that in a way I think that as a theme, that maybe is a bit more background. That's ticking away. They could have done. There's a couple of things I think they could have done more with here. I mean, what the other one being Scully's, the religious aspect with the slug and Scully. Given how many episodes have focused on Scully's Christianity, I'm surprised that they didn't. Maybe they just didn't have time, but I'm surprised they didn't work more of that in a way. So this maybe is another example where you could have done more with this, and it's just there.
Yeah. But I think in Home, obviously it basically comes down to inbreeding, doesn't it? And I think that you can talk about that without it seeming ridiculous, because it's maybe a bit more, I don't want to say relatable, but explicable, let's say. With this, how much detail can you put on it? We're a cult that worships a slug. How much context on mythology can you build around that without making it sound utterly ridiculous?
That's true.
To hear that fleshed out, I think, is the thing.
Yeah. Maybe the lack of information is the reason this works. Yeah, you're probably right. It's certainly the reason it's creepy.
All right, Sarah. So Sarah's rejoined us. Welcome back. We're just talking really about when Scully goes to see that guy at the gas station. I liked that because, the guy's perfectly nice to begin with. There's one or two curious little moments, he appears kind of behind her. Whatever. But there's nothing that's going to really set alarm bells ringing for her at the outset, I didn't think.
Yeah. He seems perfectly nice and helpful. Yeah, not creepy at all. I do remember, having that experience where you're starting to get low on gas, and it's just I hope we're going to make it. And, the fact that she's at a quarter of a tank, and she's like, no, I can make it. And, it's out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I get it. But I didn't feel like he was super threatening at the beginning, but it is X-Files, so something's going to happen. And it is interesting. I think she does make the comment later on, how she's like, how can nobody have cars? Like, where does their food come from? Like, what? They're in the middle of the desert. Yeah. Where are they getting food? How are they, they're up to something for sure.
Yeah. I like how she's, even when he seems relatively normal, she's still very guarded. Gillian Anderson always plays Scully, particularly in these kind of situations, as there's that level of her that he's friendly and polite, but there's always that suspicion in the back of her mind, these people could try and kill me, or it's just weird.
Yeah.
And that's really good because and then I like how the episode builds, and she's very quick. She doesn't take her long to go, what is this? What's going on here? I like that. It doesn't take long for that, really.
Yeah, and what I like as well is, like, I think these people are really well cast. Like, that guy at the gas station, also that other bloke, Mr. Millsap, that the guy with the phone.
He's a good actor. He is. Lawrence Pressman. He's done quite a bit of Star Trek, and he's other things, loads of other things. He's very good.
But, like, what I'm thinking is, in another context, those kinds of people wouldn't seem that scary at all. It's not like they're particularly physically threatening or anything. That's why I think it actually works quite well right at the end of the episode when the slug is killed, and it all seems to kind of dissipate. Then they just seem to sort of wander off, like, because these people are not that intimidating, really. But it's just in this context they become really unnerving.
You know what? Yeah, definitely. You know what? Millsap's house. You know what that reminded me of? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There was just some Leatherface's house. Obviously, that's full of like bones and skulls and weird shit. But it's the similar kind of idea. Screen door open, empty. It seems, lot corridors. Just in this, just falling apart essentially in a remote location. Similar idea, and the idea that you could, in theory, and in that film they do, you can walk up to this house and think, oh, there might be a perfectly normal person living here, and actually no, in that case it's a chainsaw wielding like maniac. But here, Millsap is obviously bonkers. But he presents as that nice little homely, hello, how can I help you kind of man. And it's good. It's but the atmosphere he's in is weird. When she walks into that house, you just get that sense this isn't right. This isn't right, And I like the way Scully's options kind of narrow as we go along, Sarah. Like, she hasn't got phone signal, then her car breaks down. She can't easily get away. She has to stay there for the night, overnight, Yeah. It's like, what are her options? What can she do? I like that.
It is effective. And I do appreciate the part where, she's leaving Millsap's house the first time, I think. And she kind of like takes that deep breath and puts her hand on her belly. And it's like, yep, that's a nice little reminder. Yeah, she's pregnant and she doesn't have a lot of options, because there's no way I'd want to hike 18 miles through the desert and being pregnant. Like, I mean... Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. I get it. I get why she's got to stay there. I kind of feel like I want them to be a little more creepy. I felt like they were a little too innocuous. I would have liked it to be up a level, I think. But I do get it. But, like, I appreciate that they are creepy. I just wish that it had been slightly more, yeah. Like Bates Motel, you go in there and you've got, like, creepy. It's very scary, but he's so polite in a creepy way. But I didn't feel that here.
It's funny you should mention Bates Motel, because I actually was thinking a bit of Psycho at one point. When they sort of say... It said that Mr. Millsap says this used to be a boarding house or something, doesn't he? So in Psycho, when Norman Bates turns up, he says something like they moved away the highway. So you sort of get that sense that this place used to be a bit more connected, maybe, than it now is, which I think is kind of intriguing to wonder how that happened. One touch I do like here is that, because we get a couple of scenes, don't we, with Doggett then, where he's, gets in touch with the sheriff and all that kind of thing. And we also get a moment where he calls up Danny, who used to be Mulder's contact as well.
Hey.
That's a nice little Easter egg, isn't it? I like
Good
that.
old Danny.
Yeah.
When was the last time we heard from Danny?
It's been a minute.
I don't know.
It's been season 5 or something like that. It's probably been a while.
Could it be? I don't know.
Vancouver years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get a relative lack of Doggett, don't we, in this? Like, we get bits and pieces of him, but it's mainly a Scully piece. I think it's useful because it keeps us aligned with Scully. And I think early season 8 does that quite well, doesn't it? Like, in Within, we often see Doggett from the outside. It fluctuates a bit. But, like, in those early scenes, in Patience, I think we do. Like, when he's talking to the cops. He has a quiet word with the cops, doesn't he, at one point, and Scully's kind of looking on. So I think they sort of keep him at arm's length at times in early season 8. And I think it's quite clever. And I think it's probably the right move, given the circumstances, to gradually bring him into the fold,
Absolutely. Because, we've got to trust him as well. You're talking about an audience who've had the same people for 7 years in a series that's a pop culture phenomenon that has, dominated the 90s cultural landscape. And asking then to buy into someone. Like I said earlier, I remember how difficult it was with Doggett. I really do. And I wasn't even a mega intense, shipper or Mulder and Scully fan. It was really hard. So I think having taken time, if they'd have tried to snap him into, or even worse, have him throwing Mulderisms out there, and what a funny joke, people would have gone, no, you can't do this. You cannot like for like this guy, So no, it's a smart move. I think it's one of the reasons it helps us buy into Doggett over the season so much more.
But Sarah, you are one of those people who says, no, I'm not having this.
Well, I mean, I can get on board with Doggett as character. I think, like Tony said, I think he's done well, and I think that they were smart about it. So it's not Doggett that's holding me back. I like his straightforward cop, personality, and all of that. So I don't think it's that issue that's holding me back. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I like how the episode gradually kind of ratchets up the ickiness, So like when Scully is brought in to help that guy, I think we later learn that his name is Hank, don't we? But when she looks at his wound and there's this really kind of like squishy sound, and you see the outline of the slug moving up his back, I think really gross, I think. And it reminds me of stuff like The Host, where we've had similar things we've seen similar things. Scully going in with the scissors. I love all that stuff. I think that really works a treat.
Yeah. I did like that part. Yeah. It's gross.
It's some really nice body horror like stuff. I think as well, like I love Mark Snow's music in this because he really he wants us to know that this is weird, because he'll suddenly, like, when we see the slug move and he's like, he crashes the cymbals and he's like, dang, kind of weirdness. And it's like, yep, guys, this is so strange. And it's really good. And again, it just comes out of nowhere because you don't know this is where it's going. So I remember watching this for the first time and going, what? Like that. It's very good. Yeah, very good. Icky scene.
I was actually talking to Sarah about this briefly before we started recording, Tony, in the sense of, like, I remember that too. I remember seeing this episode and having literally no idea what was coming up, no idea it was going to involve this kind of slug that's being worshipped. I wonder, as much as I love this episode, I wonder if I can ever quite recapture that, that first viewing when you just have no idea what's coming. That's pretty special, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I wonder can we talk about how this compares to Ice? Because there's that part where Scully's like wrestling with the worm thing in ice and trying to like yank it, and it's like screaming. It's that, to me, is really, really compelling stuff. But then the same thing happens here, and I do like that part. I think that that's one of the better parts of this episode that I can like get on board with, where there's like this creepy thing and you're like, what is that? And then she like pulls out this giant chunk of something and it's still kind of wiggling. You're like, ooh, what kind of a freaky monster is this? Like, but I wonder why Ice is making me like grip my chair, and this is more just like, interesting.
Well, could it be two different things? Could it be, firstly, that we kind of know the story of Ice in some ways because it's based on the Thing in many ways.
It's only if you've seen the Thing, there's the Thing.
True. But maybe it's maybe a slightly more recognisable story trope. Maybe, I don't know. More so, maybe it's because in the Ice, the parasite, it looks more like a parasite. It's more like microbial. You know, it's something you'd pull out and you maybe can read that a bit more as something that's icky, and it works on a tension level. Whereas with this, it's so odd and so bizarre and so obviously not something that science can in any way explain as to why this thing is and how it, so far anyway. I don't know. Maybe it's just so ludicrous, Sarah, on that level that it's harder to find scary in that way. I don't, maybe.
But I mean, they're similar. It's a similar setup. Like, they're isolated in ice. You know, you've got that element of they're trapped. You can't get out. You know, but I guess I wonder if it's that the other characters, because the parasite causes them to be angry and violent, maybe that's a little bit more scary. Like, there's this guy in Roadrunners that's just laying in a bed. He's not threatening at all. And these people are very passively aggressive and not seemingly threatening at all. They're just like so passive. I don't know. I just don't get that element of danger.
So I think both episodes are great episodes of the X-Files for a similar reason, which is that I think the subject matter sort of supports the character dynamics in a very good way. So like in Ice, the fact that they've got this thing that makes you paranoid, effectively changes the way you behave, that's really effective when you've got a story that is at heart about trust. And it's at quite an early point in the Mulder-Scully partnership, and they need to learn to really trust each other. So I think that's why that's a great early episode. Like I said earlier, I think this one is great because it's this really uncanny reflection of some of these other things that are going on. Scully being isolated, Scully being pregnant, etc. I think there's a difference, which is that in Ice, because it's early season 1, I think they would have been reticent to have Mulder or Scully actually infected with the organism. By the time you get to season 8, there are no such qualms. So it gets you into some interesting stuff later in the episode when Scully herself... Do you know what I mean? Because in season 1, they were always trying to keep them at a bit of a remove from the paranormal phenomena itself, in the sense that they talked about doing a body swap episode, didn't they, for season 1, which became Lazarus. They talked about it being something that happened to Mulder, didn't they? Maybe that's too far. So I think maybe that's one of the differences.
But
I don't know. Does that sound
on
plausible?
that note, at this point, you know that Gillian Anderson is going to get saved because they can't get rid of both stars. They've already lost Mulder. So maybe that's why the suspension of disbelief is so hard for me, because I just don't feel the threat.
But like, if you watch an episode like Home, for instance, you know that there's no way that they're not coming back from it, but you sort of buy into it, don't you? So I don't see why that would be such a big deal.
Well, I think it's the fact that it happens to her, like you say, that it goes there. You know, so many episodes of the X-Files or another show, it would just get to the point where she's about to be infected. Oh, don't put that in me! Don't put that in me! Doggett bursts in or Mulder bursts in. Bang! Shoot! Crash! Woo! Escape. But here, the last act is that she's on that bed and she's like, it's really so. Yeah, I agree, Sarah. You know that Scully's going to get out of it, but it's the fact she has to go through it for me, which is what makes this episode perhaps. But you know, as opposed to her just being distanced and being the one holding this thing, going, "What the hell is this?" You know.
That makes sense. Okay.
And I think, but also I think in the mailbag, for example, I know a few people sort of said they were uncomfortable and don't enjoy watching the episode for that reason, because of how much Scully goes through. And I can totally understand that. But that's quite different actually to what Sarah's saying. That isn't really what you're saying is a problem, Sarah. You just can't really buy into it. You don't feel much from it. Is that what you're saying?
Which is a good point. I get where you're coming from. Yeah, I think there's some good points. It's a good comparison actually with Ice there in different, even though it's a very visually different episode as well. In that it's hot as well, and the heat and that kind of thing. Yeah, real contrast.
When we get that stuff with Scully and that guy Hank, and I think there's a scene where she tells him he's got this parasitic organism in him and all of that. I think she actually delivers a fair amount of exposition in this episode, doesn't she, Scully? Or Gillian Anderson. And I think it works quite well, and I don't see how else you could have done it, really. Like, somebody's got to say these things. And I think one of the reasons it works quite well is because she says things like, well, I have no idea what the motives are. She works out a certain amount, but not more than that, So I think they sort of walk the line there of giving her the exposition to keep us up to speed, but qualifying it in a way that feels justified, feels authentic enough to me.
Yeah. That it logically, she can't go any further than that because so little is clear. She can understand it on a basic level, but then, why are they putting a slug in you? I know. Beats me. Yeah.
This is weird.
What?
Super weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just because, I guess, whatever.
I can't call my Ubermind paranormal partner anymore to go, Mulder, why is there a Jesus slug in here? Why are they putting slugs in someone? He'd be like, well, Scully, actually, this has been going on for a long time. And then it's like, check on that anymore. So it's like, no idea.
Even in the X-Files that he finds, they don't have an explanation.
Yeah, no, yeah.
You would think Mulder would have notes or something, but no. It's fine.
Yeah, so like Doggett actually does quite well then, doesn't he, to like tie it all together, because he finds all these photos of victims in similar wounds that have never been connected as part of the same phenomenon. So I like that he's shown as a very capable investigator. I think I have seen some debate in the fan base about, do they push Doggett on as a bit too much? Do they make him too good? And I don't think that. I just think he's a very capable, methodical investigator. And I totally buy it.
Yeah.
So I like it.
And I like that line where she says, well, you just spent all your time rereading every single X-Files. Maybe this might ring a bell.
Yeah.
I like that part.
Yeah, it's good that, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah.
So I think it's at about this point in the episode where things really take a turn then, isn't it? Because like I say, you get this thing where it's kind of half an hour of mounting tension, gradually more disturbing and disgusting. And then you get that scene where Scully's like walking around with that bus with the flashlight. That's where it sort of goes into outright horror for me. Because it's when all the locals turn up and close in. This is that line you mentioned earlier about you're going to be so loved. This is where that comes into play. And they're all like, amen. And, I think this is where as well where she refers to being pregnant. Yeah, for me, this is like a turning point in the episode. And this is where I think is it here, Sarah, where you're really struggling because you're finding this stuff.
It's just where it goes way off the rails. Like it's not creepy, and then it just goes off the rails. I kind of wish that there had been maybe a few more seconds of her trying to escape. When they come into the barn and she's just immediately surrounded, and they get her right away. I would have liked to have her at least struggle a little bit more there. But I understand, how time is, and you have to have the episode right on the mark as far as the timing goes. So I can understand why they couldn't do that. But I would have liked to see just a little bit more of a chase, maybe.
I mean, I like it when she is subdued, and we come back to that because she's quite frantic and fraught. And I think that if we'd got to that point earlier in the episode, I think that would have been kind of unbearable to watch much of that. So it's only a few minutes where she's in that kind of state, which I'm glad of, Tony, because I think, I think the slow burn that leads us into that was kind of necessary, to be fair.
Well, is this the part where Doggett is interviewing them out in the road and
around this time? He turns up.
Comes a bit after.
Okay.
Just
after.
Right after that.
I think it's effective. I can see how it's a bit of a lurch, definitely, into a different tonal register, a bit of a heightened tonal register. But I think you have to, in a way. I mean, otherwise, where does it go? What's it all for? In some senses, I think you've got to amp it up, having established this really uncanny, weird thing. And if you're choosing to put Scully through this, I think that's where you have to heighten the register. If they'd gone down another path where she was still investigating, or she was captured and someone else has got a slug in them, or whatever it is, or I don't know. But or if Doggett had come to find her and he was captured and she has to watch him have a slug put him and a sort of thing, it would have been a different style of storytelling. Whereas this, it's putting you in a situation where Scully is really out of her depth in many ways, you know? And that's not to say she's not capable, because she is. But in some ways, maybe the reason they're quite innocuous is that she's sort of underestimated them in a way, and how terrifyingly strange and intense and fanatical they are. And then she's really, I mean, she's cornered, you know? It's not often you see Scully in this situation screaming to basically have mercy on her, you know? I'm pregnant, not my baby, please. You know, please don't do this. And it's horrible. It is horrible to watch, because you're there going, oh my God, they're actually going to do this. You know, and you don't know the effect that would have. I mean, obviously, because it's a show that's going to carry on, it's not going to, I very much doubt William is the way he is because of this slug being in it. Like, you know, maybe the slug gave him like alien powers. Who knows? Maybe that's what this is all about. But yeah, it's just quite, I can see why it would turn some people off. Let's put it that way, because it does.
Tony, did you just make this a mythology episode?
I think I did.
Well
you heard
done,
it here
sir.
first. Yeah, you're very welcome. You know, if it was a Jesus slug, you know, we after all, we know that, you know, Jesus is probably an alien in the X-Files world. So, you know, everything's aliens, isn't it? So
I might actually be able to get on board with that one.
yeah, yeah, there you go. I'm getting there. We're going to get this 5, Carl.
I'm
5
at like
out
a
of 10.
3.5 now.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Is there a possibility that the slug actually is the second coming of Christ? Like, is it definitively established that it's not?
No.
Just.
I mean, that's it, isn't it? Because that like people, we live in a world of QAnon. People believe stranger things these days, don't they? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, who's to say not? Although if I was Jesus, I'd pick a better tabernacle than a slug, wouldn't you?
What would be?
You know?
What would be? What do you think?
I don't know, a really, really nice dog. Like
a
dogs are
spaniel?
lovely, aren't they? Yeah. A nice dog that would live for a long time and could talk. Oh, where this is going
Lick
now.
your face and...
Clifford the big red dog is the second coming of Christ. Is what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I found when Millsap's sort of explaining as explaining quote marks this whole thing to Scully, the use of tabernacles interesting, isn't it? Because that goes back to, I think it's Old Testament as the vessel for Yahweh and God, and I think that's previously sort of associated with like the resting place of like the Ark of the Covenant and Solomon's Temple and things like that. So the fact that they're thinking that whoever this person that can take the Jesus slug power is without it killing them, what's next? That's what I kept wondering all through this. Like, okay,
what's the end game?
Yeah, if Scully becomes the Jesus, you know, whatever, what happens then? Do they go and take over the world? Like,
I mean, she is immortal, so...
He does say forever, doesn't he? He says it'll be with you forever. So maybe this is a wink that Scully would have like survived with it.
If anybody could do it, I believe in Scully.
Well, I said earlier to Carl, I was surprised, given this, that they didn't do more with this Christianity angle with Scully. Given the amount of episodes that have referenced Scully's, you know, religious side, I'm surprised that but maybe it was just too ludicrous. You know, they can do episodes like Beyond the Sea, can't they, and all this, but really investing seriously in Scully's faith. There's a slug in her back. Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, because I think it's quite funny at the end when there's a line, isn't there, about how their defense in court is that they're being persecuted for their religious beliefs. Like, do you know what I mean? I'd like to see that argument made in court. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. That would have been a good scene. Yeah. That's true.
Let's talk about when Doggett... So Doggett turns up looking for Scully. She is able to start a fire, isn't she, in her room? So I like that she has a role in sort of kicking these things into... kicking it off at the end, you know. Doggett can't wait for backup, so he goes in. This is where we get all the stuff of, you know, hot wire in the bus, and then he has to cut it out of her, and I think it's horrible stuff. And then, of course, the moment that you love, Sarah, which is Doggett shooting the slug. So my question would be, did the slug deserve more compassionate treatment. Has the slug done anything wrong? For me, the slug's just,
that slug is just living its
Mulder
best
should have
life. It is. It's just, it's being taken such good care of, and it's just, it's living. How I don't even know what to say. It's just doing its best to survive.
I think
I do like that Doggett's hunch is believable. Where Mulder's always like, well, I just knew. And you're just like, okay, Mulder. But like his hunch, where he talks to these people and he knows that he's got a feeling about this town or whatever, like, you believe it because he's kind of proven his investigative capabilities, and you believe that, he's been this cop, and of course he would have that intuition. It makes sense. So I liked that part, that he, would go back and not just give up on Scully and, kind of circle back around. And, the part where everything on the bus, and she's just like, can you hotwire? And he's like, of course I can hotwire it. And it's like, of course you believe that because, New York cop, of course he's going to be able to hotwire a bus. Totally makes sense. But, like, I can get on board with that. Even that I can get on board with. But then it just,
Well, I think, Carl, to your question, I don't think Mulder would have shot the slug, no. I don't think
because he would have wanted to study it, wouldn't he? He would have wanted to say, like, right.
Yeah, he'd have wanted to find out if it was Jesus, and definitely, right. But then he doesn't believe in God, does he, in that way? So he'd have probably said, Scully, this is clearly an alien creature. We need to protect it. We need to find out. So, yeah, I don't think he would.
And then the cigarette smoking man would have come and put it in a vial and taken it to the nondescript room in the Pentagon.
Well, obviously the smoking man is dead right now, isn't he? Yeah. So, we can't, dead, quote mark, so we can't.
Well, now that this is a mythology episode, we can bring him back.
Yeah, we'll bring him back. Yeah, that was the deleted scene. Yeah.
I'm surprised in, the world we live in with memes and GIFs and everything, I'm surprised more people don't sort of Photoshop that scene of CSM in the pilot, put in the thing in the storeroom with things like the slug. Or, various other things from the X-Files. Yeah. Somebody needs to get on that. Come on, listeners. No, I was thinking the same. I was thinking maybe Mulder wouldn't have been quite so quick. I think it makes perfect sense that Doggett just blasts the crap out of that thing.
Yeah.
Because he's I have to say, I think this is the first true example for Doggett where he's faced with the reality of being in the X-Files. Because when he pulls a slug out of Scully's back and it's just there wriggling like this as he's covered in blood and he's looking at it, Robert Patrick's face is a wonderful, what the actual fuck is this? Like, and then he just throws
slow motion.
Yeah,
slow motion. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Now, that is a baptism of fire moment for Doggett, and it's great because he does react exactly as a cop would. What the fuck? Get it away! Bang! Shoots it. Like, and I understand that, but I think that whole sequence is actually really good because you've got him banging on the window, haven't you, and smashing the glass, and in that moment he's just trying to. It is good. It is good. I think he reacts how most of us would react, to be honest, with that thing. Like, get away.
Usually by this point, I'm just laughing so hysterically that just...
Yeah. Can I ask you guys a question? Do you think that the episode is better for the fact we have no idea what that slug is, if there is any intelligence, or if they are just fucking bonkers like these people?
No, I definitely think it is, because it makes me think of something like Detour, right? Where I love the fact that you've got those invisible men in the woods and all of that. And you get a bit of a theory there that it all relates back to Ponce de Leon or whatever. But what I like there is it's never confirmed. Okay, it's a theory. Maybe that's what's happening. We don't quite know. I like that because, kind of like I said before, I think it just would risk being ludicrous, wouldn't it? Knowing a bit more about this community, knowing what they believe. Yeah, I like the vagueness and the opacity around it. Yeah, what about you, Sarah?
I mean, I guess. I don't know that it's any more or less ludicrous. I think it's all just bonkers. So
it's true. It is all bonkers, to be fair.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the sort of brief kind of coda we get, which is like the scene in the medical centre, obviously. So Scully going home, Doggett comes in to update her on the case. So she apologises to him because it was almost a fatal mistake. And then he responds and says, yeah, like basically it was, you screwed up. So some dispute about this from what I've seen from reviewers and fans. Like, is Doggett coming across too much like a bit of an arse here? You know? Because I don't think he does, because I don't think he really hauls her over the coals that badly. I think he just states it quite plainly. You know, yes, it was a mistake. Yes, you messed up. And in the circumstances, I think it's kind of an appropriate response. And you've got to factor in the fact that he used to be a Marine, so he's got a certain background and perspective and, you know, whatever. So I'm fine with this, actually. What do you think, Tony?
Me too, yeah, me too. It's quite a sudden ending, I think, is the only thing. It sort of cuts off very quickly after that. Like, they don't have much to say, and then it's end, which I wonder about slightly. But I do think it's fair enough. He's different from Mulder, you know. He is, and these are kind of moments that are important to sort of establish that as well. They don't know each other very well yet, you know. And to him, right now, he's relatively invested in the search for Mulder and that ongoing thing, but he's not really her friend as such. He's a colleague. And I think in a situation like this, if you're in a work situation and someone has done something that is not a good idea, you might turn around and say, I think that could have been done better. You know, some people might say that. So I think it's fair enough. They are work colleagues right now. So I think him to be too, you know, over the top in terms of trying to justify it to, I don't know if that would have worked as well. So but I think the reason I'm guessing people would have been upset is that it's quite blunt, you know, and they're maybe not used to Scully being spoken to like that with what they might see as disrespect. But Scully doesn't take it that way. Scully's just like, fair enough. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I think it adds a nice bit of nuance because, you know, she's not going to be that interesting a character if she is perfect all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in this context, we need her. I think it's more productive to have her screwing up a bit and struggling. And I think that provides a lot of the impetus for this part of the season where she's struggling to, you know, striving to fill that role or, you know, trying to step up or whatever you want to put it. And I think in that sense, this quite sudden ending works well because, yeah, this is not going to end like a traditional episode where Mulder and Scully would have talked a bit around the themes of the episode or anything like that. It's different now, is what I think. So what do you think, Sarah?
I agree. I think that, you know, she is trying to find her footing and she's going to slip up now and then. And I think it's a good way to establish, you know, whatever kind of partnership that she's got going on with Doggett or, you know, their working relationship at this point. They're both trying to figure this out and mistakes are going to happen. So I think it's an interesting part of her arc that she, like you said, that she is trying to make her way through this new reality, I guess.
All right, guys, before we go into the mailbag, any final thoughts on this one? Are you up to a 5 yet, Sarah?
No.
Yeah. Oh, no! Maybe the mailbag. We can do it in the mailbag. I think we've covered everything, to be fair.
Yeah.
I think we've gone deep on the slug, for want of a better term. There must be a better term than that.
I know. Let's see. I mean,
let's move swiftly on.
Yeah. Well, no, my final thought is just I appreciate how sparse it is as an episode. You know, like I say, dialogue light with these brief bits of exposition, a lot of mystery around what's actually going on, very evocative use of locations. So, really good stuff, I think. Let's see what people think in the mailbag now. Okay, so particularly good mailbag this week. I think we had over 50 responses, which is good. I'll just read a few of them. Yeah, obviously by the time this episode comes out, it will probably have fallen down the page. You know, it would be harder to find it in the basement. But I think if you type in Roadrunners, you'll be able to find the thread and go back and read it all if you want. But let's see. So Cathy Glinski says, this episode is such an important step in Scully's journey. She pulls a Mulder, ditching Doggett to go it alone. But she ultimately has to acknowledge her need for a partner, possibly more readily than Mulder did. While she is still feeling the need to fill Mulder's role, she has to figure out how to do that. I love how this story arc builds over the first half of season 8. And this episode, in addition to being a really creepy story with incredible performances, contributes to the longer story in a very compelling way. All right, let's hear from Chandru Ravindran, who says that this is one of his favourite episodes. He says it's got great character growth for both Scully and Doggett, incredible acting and fantastic direction, but really it's one of my favourites for one reason, tension. I've never been more concerned for Mulder or Scully physically. Sure, they've been through emotional trauma after emotional trauma, but this episode reaches Breaking Bad levels of tension. This is a show where we are usually concerned about the main character's emotional journeys. Actual physical danger, while entertaining, usually ends up feeling slightly muted because we know they will survive. But Roadrunners gets me to a level of unease that I rarely get to because we've seen the level of violence these people are capable of, and the California landscape really sells how isolated Scully is. With all that in hand, Roadrunners elicits the same visceral reaction out of me that a horror movie does. And then he says, really, the only flaw in the episode is the awful looped groaning noise that plays over and over when Scully is strapped to the bed with a Jesus slug crawling up her spine. But I end up overlooking that groan because, hey, how do I know I wouldn't sound exactly like that if I had a freaking Jesus slug crawling up my spine? I didn't notice that.
I didn't.
Did you notice that?
No.
The looped noise. I'll have to go back and look for that.
Yeah. I don't think I did either. No, I think he makes a really good point though about the brutality. In that it's that because those two scenes where the driver of the bus, the woman, beats those two men to death. Scully's like, "You murdered him," in that sort of shock, and it is really, really horrible. Like the way she does it, just pummels the skulls to bits. And I think that's something, and again, we mentioned Home earlier, that is reminiscent of the Peacock savagery as well. It's that same idea. So, yeah, I think he's got a good point there about that. That adds to the horror and the tension of it.
Okay, so Anna Gomez says, during the beginning of season 8, I was worried until Scully started showing that the show was going to have her miscarried a baby, because that seemed to be the sort of thing the show will do to Scully. So this episode double scared me for that reason, since it seemed that having a worm inside your back was probably not good for the baby. For better or worse, the show's plan was even worse, giving William up for adoption. I suppose we'll come on to that debate in the next year or so, won't we, in the fullness of time on the X-Cast about William.
Yeah.
I would say with that remark though about the baby, in that I think by this point we've probably established that the baby's going to be a mythology arc point already. Although, yes, I know there isn't the mystery. It's not. We haven't had Per Manum yet, where we get but Scully to be pregnant. I'd be very surprised if that would be dealt with in episode 4, a standalone episode in a series like this. Especially when there's still lots of questions about the paternity and lots of questions about how it happened. So I personally never felt like the baby was at risk, even though logically it might be in a situation like this. It's for me too important a part of Scully's ongoing story for it to. But I can understand if you're looking at it from a purely this episode perspective, I can get that idea. Yeah, but I think broadly it wouldn't happen in an episode like this. I'd be surprised.
Yeah, what do you reckon, Sarah?
That was something that never really occurred to me. Like Tony said, that I just. I never quite got that far. I was just more worried about the slug, I guess. Just, I have a hard time concentrating in that part of the episode anyway, because I'm just, but that's just me. So
do you
I'm
find the
alone
episode?
On this hill. It's fine.
Do you find the episode at this point quite sluggish, Sarah?
I was waiting for that.
Hey, yo.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it unfolds at a snail's pace, doesn't it? That's right, just do a few more. Fred Bratica says, this episode is what had me thinking, hey, maybe they really can do this without David Duchovny. I love how it explores how lost Scully is on a personal level. Like, how can she be herself and on the X-Files without Mulder there to counterpoint? She'll have to counterpoint herself, and she tries, but she's not Mulder. She's not supposed to be. And the fact that she was desperate to the point of telling these stupid strangers something she still considered a big secret, that she's pregnant, and the way she said it, like, look, I'm not a fan of where the kid's storyline went, but I absolutely love and care about Scully, and her anguish was gutting. It's not about the violence for me, but her trying to fill a role she wasn't meant for. Having to share a personal secret to try and save her life, fighting with brainwashed cultists is not new for her, but she didn't have a usual partner to bust down the door and help. But then, yay, Doggett. Hey, this guy's not so bad after all. He was able to do the math, find her mouldering ass, and save the day. But she still won't trust him completely. Come on, Scully. So I think it's interesting what Fred says there at the outset of the post about maybe they really can do this without Duchovny. I felt that probably earlier than this, even when I first saw season 8. I felt that from episode 1, and then I liked Patience, and I loved this. So I think I'd already come to that idea. Yeah, not everybody did come around to that perspective, obviously. But, Tony, you're saying it took you a while with season 8?
I think I don't think on a structural, dramatic level it took me a while. I think on a is this the same? Is this show? Is it going to work in that same way? Level? I think it's a slightly different thing. I think in terms of the way it's written and the way it's performed, I think yes. And I mean, certainly now with distance, knowing where it all goes, 100% it works. So I think there's two different ways to look at it there, really.
Yeah, I like that comment because I can appreciate how it works. How, like, I can appreciate that perspective of how, it works. And yeah, I can get on board with that one.
All right, let's just do a couple more quick comments. Deana Ferreri says, I shudder the entire time, but kind of enjoyed a shuddering. So yeah, it seems like some people are really able to sort of get into that and some people not. Valerie Kelly finally says, the creepiest episode of season 8 and one of the creepier ones of the series. I don't understand Scully's insistence on going alone, but I do like how Doggett proved himself to be a good ally. Overall, good, solid Monster of the Week. Yeah, I would say I would go further than that. I would say like a great episode, but I appreciate that point. So quite a good note to end on, I thought. Yeah, with my bias selection of mailbag comments.
Well, I was going to say, are we? Did we find in the mailbag generally that it was more skewing positive, or it was a mixed bag?
It was more skewing positive. I think there were some dissenting voices of people basically saying, but it seemed quite different to what Sarah is saying. One or two people, like I think Katie Doe said, just can't enjoy it. It's kind of too much, I think. It's a level of horror that she can't get on board with, can't enjoy. And I understand that for sure. That seemed to be the sort of where the more negative stuff was coming from, more than people seem to generally think it was a well put together episode, I would say.
Fair play.
Which I think it is. So,
yeah. Sarah, can we settle on a 4? Hey, can we settle on a 4? Come on. You got to 3.5.
I don't know, Tone.
I'll drop to a 9 if you come up to a
Okay, I'll concede that if you can drop down.
4.
Right.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Win. I'll take that as a win. That's our win.
Close.
We'll have to. Yeah. One day we'll watch it again and we'll make you see the light, Sarah.
Maybe if I get really, really, really drunk, but I'm probably just gonna laugh all the way through. Sorry.
Drunk watch for episode for Roadrunners. Maybe.
Patrons. I think that could be good fun.
Yeah, it might be done. Might need to be done. It could actually be fun. I think.
All right, both. I think we'll leave it there. Pleasure as ever to be paired with you. Where can we find you all online? Sarah, how about you? Where are you online? What are you up to?
I'm on Twitter at Sarah L. Blair, and I'm on Instagram at author.sarah.blair. So you can find me over there.
Tony?
Yeah, best places to get me are on Twitter at AJBlackWriter. You'll find my website, ajblackwriter.com. And I'm also sort of kickstarting a website that I was involved with before called failcritics.com. So a bit more of my writing is going to go on there, I think, right now. So if you want to check some of the newer stuff I'm doing. And obviously just keep an eye on the We Made This Network generally at W Made This on Twitter, and we're on Instagram and Facebook as well. And the website wemadethisnetwork.com for all the other brilliant podcasts out there. So there's a lot to go and listen to.
Great stuff. Cheers, Tony. Looking forward to hearing, you're back, like you said earlier, on a couple of episodes later in season 8, aren't you? Which will be good fun.
Yeah, I think I'm doing Red Rum with Kurt. So I love that episode. And then I think, are we doing Vietnam then much later, Carl?
I think we are, aren't we? I think we thought for the buddy comedy, with what we reteamed for that.
Yeah, we're going to be Riggs and Murtaugh our way through through that one. That'll be fun. Yeah. Can't wait.
All right, so I'm on Twitter at CKJ Sweeney. Find the X-Cast, of course, at the X_cast. You can find us on Instagram. Where are we on Instagram, Sarah? I can never remember.
The X-Cast Pod.
Yeah. The X-Cast Pod. Brilliant. Also on Facebook, and we've got a page there. We've also got a basement group for discussion. So yeah, that's all for today, listeners. Thanks for listening to this episode all about Roadrunners. Till next time, always remember, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. The Failed Critics Podcast.
This Leatherface isn't a young guy anymore. He's a big guy. He's an older guy. Like, just sprint a little bit up the road and shoot him. Like, he's got a big chainsaw as well, that if he's swinging it around, he's got to be careful with it or he's going to hurt himself. He's not going to be quick. Literally, some of them have got guns at some point in this film. Just sprint 20 yards up the road and shoot him.
There's a number of plot holes in this where the Hardesty character has the opportunity to point blank him and just doesn't do it. And it's just like, you've gone all this way, you've waited 50 years to see him again, and you could literally just blow his head off. Yeah. He's not posing any threat to you whatsoever. In fact, he's sat on his bed waiting for you to do something.
And then you have a little chat with him. So just blow him away.
Free with this month's issue.
Quite often, things that go fast is good. But that's not, because it doesn't go really fast. Yeah. Just goes faster. Yeah, and also when you've been ominously stalking, which is what that baseline does, it's just ominous, then going fast is not. You know, like Jason Voorhees doesn't run, does he? No. He doesn't need to. He remains ominous the whole time. Yeah, but that's what this song should have done. He's not Jason Voorhees, he's the T-1000's brother. And did the T-1000 run? Not really. Yeah. Like, I mean, a bit, but not that a lot. Bit when he's fucking chasing after them in the car, he's definitely running. Maybe quite that's famously. Why he did it. You know what?
Geek Polymath.
I don't think I'm a geek because I'm gay, but I think it fucking helped.
Well, listen, so I have theories about this. Good. Strap in for a conspiracy session.
Please.
It's all to do with being an outsider, which, of course, as fingers crossed, as society progresses and advances, we will hopefully get to the stage where just sexuality will have nothing to do with you being an insider or an outsider, but it's massively a part of it. There's a reason Russell T Davies felt such a strong connection to Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And I think those kind of outsider bubbles overlap.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. The X-Cast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the X-Cast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the X-Cast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the X-Cast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.